Alright guys, let's go over this build. Now there's a few things that I've done with this build that are making it really, really good, and I absolutely love this build. So first let's just go over the skills, because obviously this is what we use to do our damage. So I'm not using armor piercing rounds anymore. I was using it, but I found something else that I like much better. So let me explain kind of how this works. So I use the mortar cannon to throw down mortars, and that mortar shoots out gas canisters, and it also shoots out cluster grenades, and essentially this is your AoE, and it's just going to clear everything. Now the damage dealer is explosive grenade. So with the cluster, it converts 20% of physical damage to fire. With explosive grenade, it converts 80% of physical damage to fire. So with this, we are getting a lot of fire damage, which works well with the rest of our build. So this is the big damage dealer for smashing bosses, etc. Now with this, we are doing fire penetration. We are doing second wind, which what this does is when it gives us more uses of the skill. We have elemental attack damage. We have supported skills have less detonation time. This one here, supported skills have less cost, because there is a bit of a mana problem with this build, which we'll talk about soon. However, I'm now using, this is different from my last build variation, Siege Cascade. This is really, really good. And essentially what it does is it shoots up in the air, and then it drops down the projectiles, and they explode on the enemy. And this is really good AoE as well. So that's why I'm not using armor piercing rounds anymore. And this actually synergizes well with pinning, which we'll talk about in a second. So Siege Cascade essentially shoots up in the air, and then it does 140% more damage to immobilized enemies. Immobilized enemies are enemies that are pinned. Now, these specific ones here, mortar cannon and explosive grenade, pin enemies. So if you fire these first, you're going to pin the enemy, and then you're going to do 140% more damage on the enemy because of these. And this works really, really well on the boss when the boss is pinned. So with this, we have supported skills have 25% more attack speed. That's because when we shoot it up in the air, we want to shoot it as fast as we possibly can. We have 20% more damage and 30% less movement penalty. The movement penalty doesn't really matter, because when you're shooting this, you're standing still. So the movement penalty does really nothing. It's just a 20% straight damage boost. This one here, supported skills have 60% increased bow reload speed. We want this to reload as fast as possible. Our supported skills have 40% more damage when we hit enemies on low life. It just means that the enemies get basically obliterated when they're below 30% life. It works really well with this build. This is really important. Increases the reductions to projectile speed, also applies projectile damage with supported skills. Supported skills have 40% more projectile speed. I've tested this out, and it makes the projectiles fall down very, very fast. Without this, the siege is not very viable. It works, but it's not very good. Okay, so that's really what works really well. And we're also going to show you how scavenged plating works. This gives us a massive amount of armor. We'll talk about that in a second. Time of Need gives us some health buffs, but we also have 30% increased mana generation gem in here, because we need that for this build. And we also have some more maximum life regeneration from this, or recovered from this here. We'll talk about scavenged plating in a second, but what we're doing with this build is we are essentially building up as much life as possible. We are building up as much armor as possible. And we also stack more armor with the scavenged plating, which I'll show you in a second. And then we have armor applies elemental damage. So let me actually show you how that works right now, and then we'll come back and look at the rest of the stats real. Why there are no enemies. So we're going to do the siege thing. We're going to rain down these things. You see the armor went up to 34,000. It increased massively. And our elemental damage went up 34,000 with the scavenged here. So you have thorns and more armor. So I have more armor, and then the armor scales. And then because we have this armor applying elemental damage, this also scales with armor, right? And this is basically on consistently, because every time you hit an enemy or kill an enemy or whatever, this is going up and up and up. You'll see it does it again. So this is constantly on when you're fighting. We essentially just, let's watch it go down. Get rid of this guy. Let's watch it go down. Our armor is now going to decrease massively, and so is the extra elemental damage that we get. So this is a really, really good thing. See, we just went down to 25 and 24. So we are getting a huge boost from that I just showed you, right? So we'll go back now and we'll have a look at a few other things. So this is really, really good for our tankiness. So what we do to do that, I'll just show you. We do scavenged plating, and we do that, and then we have the skills have 35% more skill duration. That doesn't really matter because it's on all the time, so that's probably my bad. And then we have +2 level of supported physical skills. Now, the thing is it gives it that plus level, etc. But I don't really have too many options for skill gems, so I just put those in. But how do we get that elemental damage? So if we go to my gear, it's on my here. So you'll see it says 41% of armor also applies to element. That means it's 41% of our armor boosts our elemental damage. And because with that skill that we're using, we are increasing the armor by a huge amount. Not only that, we are also increasing the elemental damage at the same time. So that's really, really cool. So I'll just first go over my gear and then we'll go over my passives. So the bow cost me the most. This was the most expensive thing. I think it was about 300 divines. Everything else was very cheap. So we're trying to scale physical damage because our siege cascade only does physical damage, only explosive, and cluster does fire. So explosive takes the most of our fire damage, and siege is physical. So we're doing physical damage. We're getting more additional projectiles. We are doing more physical damage, some increased accuracy rating, which is needed, and attack speed, which is very important, and then 3 levels to attack skills. This is pretty much OP bow right here. Very expensive. You can get something cheaper with similar stats, but not exactly the same. The headpiece, we've just got some resistances, and we are going as much armor as we possibly can, and life. And then the 41% armor also applies to elemental damage. So that boosts our explosive grenade and our cluster. We're scaling that way. Oh, that's actually the same thing. I did not realize that. Okay, so it's probably double, I suppose. This one here, we also have armor resistances, and life. Amulet, you can just go through and pause the screen here, but we have +3 to projectile skills, which is very important here. We have some mana. We need mana regen with this. That's really important. We have the ring here, which is physical damage, life, mana, strength, and resistances. All of the resistances are like 70%, apart from chaos. This here is physical, fire damage, fire resistance, more mana regeneration, and then more fire damage attacks. Now, the gloves, this is important. You'll see that it says armor 1009. I'll show you something in the passive skills that is very important. If we go to the character screen here, we see it says invasion 27%. So how am I getting 27% evasion if I'm stacking armor? Well, if we go into the passive skills here, which we'll go back to in a second, somewhere down here, so down here in our passive tree, we're doing 1 +2 evasion rating per item armor on gloves. So just by having this one node here, that's it, just one node, we are essentially converting our armor on our gloves to evasion, which is massive because we're getting basically a free 27% evasion. Where is it? We're getting free 27% evasion for no reason, basically just for free. We're also getting a deflection rating. We are getting chance to deflect at 35%. This is also basically from a passive skill. If we go up to the ascendancy here and we go to here, around about, somewhere here, so we get it here, gain deflection rating equal to 20% of armor, gain 100% of evasion rating as extra alignment threshold. But what we're doing is we're getting a deflection of equal to 20% of our armor. So again, we are getting free defenses here just from 1 point. That's it. From 1 point, we're getting 35% deflection. From 1 point, we're getting 27% evasion, which helps a lot with this build. So that's how that works. So that's kind of the defenses there. So now let's jump back into the skill points here, and we will go over those. But just quickly, that's the gear, the belts, like whatever. These are the boots, 30% movement speed. Once again, armor, maximum life strength, and resistances. And then we obviously have those gloves that I talked about with the resistances as well. But you can pause the screen and go over, or I'll actually leave a build guide below that you can check out. So now let's go into the passive tree and let me show you how this kind of all works. So with the ascendancy, we're doing tactician. We just have a straight 20% increased totem damage here. We have 15% increased armor. We have that deflection rating, and then we have 15% increased armor as well, just because these other ones are kind of useless for this build. We have 20% pin build up, 20% immobilization build up, 40%, 20% increased pin build up, and then projectile damage builds pin on enemies, and they cannot, when they're pinned, they can't move. So what that means is, and we have more pin, we have 50% armor break on pinned enemies. So what that basically means is when we're doing our skills, when we're doing our mortar cannon and our explosive grenade, we are pinning enemies, we're breaking the armor, then we can use our Siege of Cascade to do 140% more damage to those pinned enemies. So this is huge on bosses. Smashing bosses not a problem with this build. So that's how that all synergizes together. Now, this is a little bit like messy because normally people just go on the outside and get jewels. Now, I didn't do that. What I did is I went with some attack damage here, projectile damage. I went with defenses here, because this was very squishy. I just have a mix of intelligence and dexterity and strength, but dexterity and strength are my top ones. This is for weapon 1. Now I've locked the weapon, so I only have one weapon, but we'll get more points to use. We've gone with attack speed. And then what we'll do is we'll just go kind of over here. We got just normal dexterity and stuff here. But here we have increased totem damage, increased totem damage, increased totem damage, increased totem damage again, increased totem life, increased resistances on it, increased damage reduction, and then increased life so it lasts longer. Then over here we have some defenses, increased armor, and we have defend with 200% of armor against critical hits and 15 strength here, which is helpful. And then we have increased armor. We have 25% increased armor and then gain some stun threshold, but we get a flat 25% armor here, which is very big. We go down here, we get break 10% increased armor, and we get a physical damage buff, which is what we want. And then break 50% armor on pinning an enemy. So when we're pinning those enemies, we're also breaking their armor. So you can smash them even more. And then we have 40% increased armor, break 40% increased armor, and then 25% increased physical damage. Over here is just basically damage buffs in this one. This one is grenade buffs, and then we can shoot an extra projectile. We go down here, a little bit of movement speed here. And then we go down here, we have bow reload, which is super important for our siege. And then we have grenade detonation stuff here and damage for our totems and our grenade skills. And then here we have ballista, which is totems as well. Ballista critical damage bonus, ballista damage. We have critical damage bonus. We have critical chance. We have critical bonus as well for the ballistas. We go down here, we just have some straight armor stuff here, okay? However, we're only doing this to get the 25% armor rating and the 25% here, so we basically want this to get these big 25 buffs. We go down here, this is the same, we just have bow reload speed here, basically bow reload speed, this is really important for our siege. We have some grenade stuff. Grenades, 50% chance to activate a second time. Grenade damage increased. And then we have some speed here, attack speed stuff here. We go down here. We are getting defenses once again because we want to get to that 1 evasion rating per armor. Okay. And then you could also turn it around if you have that, but we don't have that. And then we go down here. We have grenade damage as well. And then also gain 4% of damage as extra fire damage for every different grenade fired in the past 8 seconds. So essentially, when we fire our cluster grenade and then we fire our explosive grenade, we get 8% damage because we fired 2 different grenades within the past 8 seconds. So that's quite big as well. These are the gems I'm running. 19% armor increase, 11% increase mana regen, 12% increase elemental damage, and 4% increase attack speed with crossbows. Over here as well, we also have some ballista damage, 50% increased mobilization build-up. We have some, what is this one? Skills have 10% maximum number. Oh yeah, so you do another totem. Attacks used by ballista, we have increased attack speed, And then there's just some defenses here. Now, this gem here, we are running 6% increased life regeneration, not really that important. 18% increased flammability magnitude, which is useful for this build. 18% increased totem damage. Damage penetrates 10% fire resistance. That's pretty good. This one here is, so these are just a mix of intelligence and dexterity. You can see the amounts in the build planner. This is a pretty big hitter here. This was a little bit expensive, like 5 divines, I think. So 21% increased critical hit chance, 25% increased critical damage bonus, 9% increased attack speed, 1% increased strength, and then we get 40% increased effects to suffixes. So any suffixes on this particular jewel, you are going to get. So where's our suffixes here? So increased critical damage, we're going to get another 40% on top of the 18%, and then we're going to get another 40% on top of that one, and then another 40% on top of this one. So these 3 bottom ones get a 40% increase effect on top of what's already there. So this is a massive one as well, and those are the passive skills. I'll have it in the build planner below. But essentially, what you're doing with this build is you're putting down your mortars. This is going to be your big AoE. It's going to do a lot of damage. It's going to kill a lot of things. You do these for your big damage. This is big damage. And then you do this when enemies are pinned, and you're doing 140% extra damage on top of those enemies that are pinned. This is a massive damage booster as well. So when you're hitting bosses, you do this. You smash them with these, and then when they're pinned, you go in with this, and you're doing 140% more damage. And that's the build. It's very easy, very fun. It's a little bit clunky because you're standing still a lot of the times, but I feel like this is probably one of the best Merc builds I've ever done. I'll see you guys in the next video.